Hello, everyone. My name is Jordyn Smith, and I am the voice and the astrologer behind the YouTube channel and the website Nonconformist Conscience. I feel like a lot of you guys know who I am, but I have to say that for the people who are new. So, welcome if this is your first time viewing something of mine. I have been seeing more activity on my Instagram and Facebook, all of my things pertaining to the astrology. And so I wanted to take the time to talk about how I do these videos. I teach so many people. I have people I tutor. I really feel like this is something that a lot of people are wanting to learn how to implement in their lives. And so the way that I do this is I break things down in a systematic, very Virgo-like way in order to communicate what astrology is reflecting and also how we can utilize it in our lives. With the weekly forecast, to really understand how this can be showing up in your own individual life, it's good to know where these transits are occurring in your own chart by house, and that will give you more information. So, without further ado, let's talk about this week. So, today is the 6th. We have Venus in Capricorn square the nodal axis. The south node is in Libra, the north node is in Aries. And whenever something squares the nodal axis through transit, this can be a time where we are confronted with the choices that have led to this moment in time. And because this is dealing with Venus, we're dealing with our relationship to self and our relationship to others. And there's an emphasis on really needing to self-reflect on how our choices and how we've structured relationships have played a role into this point in time. And so this planet, Venus, squaring the nodal axis, really represents where the present moment, Venus, is meeting with the past and the prior dynamics of a Libran nature and where we're trying to go, Aries, the north node, how we're trying to evolve through this dynamic. And the Aries north node is ruled by Mars and Capricorn that is culminating, meaning that it's just behind Pluto wanting to meet up in the sky with it, and it will meet up in the sky whenever it transits and ingresses into the sign of Aquarius. But with Venus right now, square this nodal axis, we can be really coming into an awareness of the Libra dynamics, because this is also the last node that Venus squared. So it's really, there's an emphasis on paying attention to this part and resolving these dynamics that the South Node in Libra is speaking to in order for us to then be able to actualize and evolve through this North Node in Aries right now. So what does this mean? This means that Venus in Capricorn is very much about taking responsibility for our own growth, our own choices that have led to this moment. This is about taking responsibility. My Oklahoma almost came out. Sorry, guys. About taking responsibility for the ways in which we have participated in structuring our relationships and our relationship to self. Capricorn so much has to deal with conditioning, and it is naturally part of the cardinal cross. So there's this emphasis on wanting to start a new cycle, but needing to tidy up some things before that new cycle can start. So with the cardinal signs, there can be this emphasis on taking 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. The need to reflect, because those 2 steps forward can induce fear sometimes. Like, oh, what did I just do? What choice did I just make? And it's because there's a new cycle wanting to start, but this new cycle creates fear because it's the unknown. It's doing something out of one's comfort zone, essentially. And this is true with all of the cardinal signs. So with Venus and Capricorn, we're looking at our conditioning. This is of a societal, family, cultural, religious. It can be all of these types of conditioning factors. And what our conditioning does is it teaches us it's no different. Our parents, when we're younger, they teach us about, these are what our family values. This is what we do in our family. This is the way that we interact with each other. All of this creates an imprint, which is essentially a conditioning factor. If your family took you to church growing up, then that church is going to condition these things. It's going to condition your beliefs, and what you believe is what gives meaning to life, and what gives meaning to life conditions and speaks to what we value, and what we value speaks to what we need. And so it's really about looking at all of this. And then the South Node is about, have imbalances been created through these dynamics? What were your family dynamics like when you were younger? Were your parents codependent? Have you been in codependent relationships? Are you a man who depends on a woman to nurture him? Are you a woman who gets her value out of nurturing a man? It's any type of imbalance that can be highlighted where we might be outsourcing a need or something within ourselves, and how that is actually really a distortion. And with Venus and Capricorn, it wants us to say, hey, let's think about and actualize how we can come to an understanding of why this is occurring, where it's occurring, and if maybe we're repressing some dynamic within ourselves. This can be a person who grows up in a home where culturally they have the rules of nothing inside of this house leaves this house. We don't let people know our business. If it's a little boy, I'm going to give you something to cry about, so that can really condition someone to suppress their emotional dynamics. And because there's no voice given to it when they're younger, when they're older, it can create an imbalance of, I don't know how to express what it is I'm feeling inside of myself. I don't know how to access this. I was never taught this. I was never shown this. I never had a role model for this. And so for girls, it can be, or people who are AFAB, they could have been conditioned to, you get your value from whether or not you can be in a relationship. If you wait too long to get married, your value goes down. You're a tainted woman, especially if we're pulling in patriarchal distortions of sexuality. So this really speaks to a bunch of different dynamics that can be surfacing. I can't tell you how many people that I am seeing as clients, or that are friends of mine, or even seeing it on social media, that are dealing right now with either they've left someone, or they are having to make a judgment call, a discerning a correct judgment call on whether or not something should end. And this is one of the ways that this can really surface right now. It's what I'm seeing a lot. It's where a lot of people right now, whether they're men or women that are making these calls or have done this are now in this time of really wanting to understand why this has occurred. But what I'm also seeing is that it's a little bit tough right now for some people because of all of the Capricorn energy that's been going on. It can feel like someone is really wanting to process what's going on inside of them, but they don't really know what is going on. And this it can be because Capricorn can reflect where we have actually suppressed this dynamic within ourselves, you know, in the past, and how it's been a learned behavior, a conditioned behavior. And so right now, there's this emphasis on really needing to be self-determined, to continue to do the work of self-reflection, of really wanting to understand our emotional dynamics. The polarity of Capricorn is Cancer, which speaks to, if we self-reflect Capricorn, we can understand our emotional dynamics, and an emotional maturation process can happen. And so right now, a lot is surfacing pertaining to all of this. It's, you know, this can even be, and I think I said this early on in this video, is that it can be where we're all of a sudden starting to want to self-reflect on prior relationships that we've had as well. Like, a lot of people are wanting to transform their relationship with themselves, and this is part of Uranus and Taurus. And so in order to do that, in order to understand, what do I value, what do I need, there's this self-reflection of also looking back on prior relationships and how they were structured, how they worked. And with Saturn and Pisces being the ruler of this Venus, we can tell that all of this is wanting to culminate. These old ways of structuring what we value, what we need, what we give meaning to, what we believe in, how we've structured our emotional reality stemming from all of that. It's about releasing and dissolving man-made constructs. And it's also about self-reflecting on, if we're looking at our relationships, self-reflecting on, what are my ideals about my relationships? Does that stem from conditioning? It's so often we hear that someone's a power couple, or they are, they do everything together. They're on these vacations, they're doing this, they're doing that. And so we can see that on a collective level, a lot of this revolves around the ideal image of what a relationship should be. If you do this, you'll be happy. And then all of a sudden we see these people we thought were happy that are showing all of this, that they weren't. So, and it's because an ideal can really speak to where we can experience disillusionment. And so for a lot of people right now, they can be reflecting on when they felt that in their relationships, or they may be experiencing that right now. And disillusionment really happens when we give ultimate meaning outside of ourselves. I know that I've been guilty of doing this, of trying to obtain the perfection of something, the ideal of something, only to find out once I grasp it that it's an illusion. It's Piscean. It's like, no, that didn't make me happy. No, like this, I had multiple careers before I started doing this, and each one I was like, this is going to make me happy. This is going to make me happy. Guess what? I did really well in them, and it didn't make me happy. So even stuff around work, Capricorn, and your relationship with work, and your purpose in work, and your social role or your social function can be coming up and having this disillusioning experience of, I've obtained this goal, this thing that I gave ultimate meaning to, and I'm dissatisfied. And so what that really points to is the need to be self-determined, Capricorn, to be able to nurture and emotionally validate what's inside of you, not out there, not the job, not the relationship, but what's going on to nurture this and to find value in that experience. It's about not externalizing something. It's about really becoming self-sufficient. And this also speaks to Uranus and Jupiter and Taurus being ruled by this Capricorn Venus squaring the nodal axis. It's about being self-reliant and cultivating healthier self-esteem, or understanding where we might be overcompensating in areas of our life for fear of being our authentic self. This is more of the Jupiter and Taurus piece, where that has created imbalances, or if it has. It's about liberating from old values and needs that have been conditioned, where we've over-identified with them, and then we've had disillusioning experiences because of that. And that's part of Uranus and Taurus. And so it's like through this self-reflective process that is wanting to happen right now, old structures can culminate and dissolve, and new values of a timeless and natural way can emerge. And Jupiter and Taurus, ruled by this Venus, is really about, how do we expand upon this? What feels natural for me? That way I can live authentically, and this can fuel a healthy self-esteem and an inner reliance that's wanting to be rebirthed, essentially. So, and of course, Uranus and Taurus has been about the radical transformation of our relationship to self since the nodes were in, Scorpio, Taurus. So this is all going down. And as this happens, Venus is in a new phase conjunction to the south node of Jupiter, and Venus rules this transiting Jupiter in Taurus. And so if we're looking at our beliefs, Jupiter, and how that conditions our values and needs, Taurus, Venus on the south node of Jupiter in the sign of Capricorn, ruled by Saturn and Pisces, is really speaking to the conditioned beliefs. The prior south node conditioned beliefs. And that is also square this nodal axis, with the resolution being that south node in Libra. How these beliefs have created cycles of maybe self-abandonment, or repressing one's nature or inner truths or inner authority as a way to maintain a status quo of a relationship. Saturn ruling this in Pisces is wanting us to really jump into these emotional dynamics and to explore them, and to really cultivate an inner awareness or an inner standing of how this has taken effect in our lives. And this is on a collective level. Just think about how this can be viewed on a collective level. How on a collective level our values have created imbalances between countries, Capricorn, and the boundaries. How it's created imbalances with how we, have a relationship with this earth, and the distortions and the over, oppressive nature of it. It's all of these dynamics. Something is wanting to shift in the collective, and that is very much about Pluto and Aquarius. And so we can see how this astrology is really reflecting this, and how there's a personal way of working with it that can help facilitate this ongoing evolution within the collective as well. But because Jupiter is a part of this, because it's ruled by that Venus, and Venus is conjunct that south node of Jupiter, it's more about understanding what feels natural to us. If we're discovering the distortions and the imbalances perpetuated by these distortions, stemming from our learning throughout our life, revolving around our beliefs and what we give meaning to, and how that conditions everything, especially our relational needs, there's this need to become self-reliant through understanding what our personal values are, what our personal needs are, to meet those. That helps to emotionally validate ourselves and create a sense of inner security. That way, we're not externalizing our security upon another person or, another type of relationship that we have, whether it be work or this or that. So Saturn is still in a crescent phase sextile to Jupiter as this is going on. And this really speaks to the dissolving of these old beliefs and really being able to integrate this awareness as a way to create a new structure, a new form within, on an emotional level, on an internal level. And this has the ability to help us change how we structure relationships through first restructuring our relationship to self. With Uranus, a big part of all of this is about when we do this work, it changes our inner vibration, it changes our inner magnetism. We then can bring forth, we get attracted to other people who are now in alignment with what it is we've come to understand about ourselves. So as this is going on, Mars in Capricorn is also in a last quarter sextile to Neptune. And so Mars is culminating towards Pluto in Aquarius. And Mars is so much, yes, it's about courage, but on the flip side, it's about fear. And this culmination process towards Pluto in Aquarius is about this liberation, liberating from the known. Whereas Mars in Capricorn is really about what we've known. It can be where we are making a choice, we're desiring to make a choice, and we're really afraid because it's new. We're doing something new. And with Mars in a last quarter sextile to Neptune, it can be an ease of integration if we choose to act on making brand new choices through self-reflection and correct judgment making. And that this ultimately has a propensity to ignite transformation and a liberation process if we can be self-determined to commit to this process. And that is part of the culmination. And then also when there is a direct conjunction later on with Mars and Pluto, when Mars enters Aquarius, which is not this week yet, we can really start to come into more awareness as to how prior choices, prior desires have affected us. And so there is this need for courage. There's this need for self-determination. And the sextile to Neptune really speaks to how this can be healing, how it can heal these dynamics that are surfacing and coming up right now, and how we might have to have faith when we're making choices right now. But if we have this sincere intention and we're coming from a place of correct judgment making, that this is a process that can be integrated. And this can be also about really forgiving especially of ourselves, because a lot of anger can be coming up right now when we're coming into the awareness of maybe how we abandoned ourselves in the past for the sake of the status quo, or where someone had the inability to listen to where we were coming from. All of these dynamics. So this is kind of like a hang on moment, like trust this process, be self-determined to do so. And a lot of healing can happen during this time. I love that on the 7th, Lilith in Sagittarius is in a crescent sextile to Mercury in Aquarius. And I feel like Lilith is really facilitating a process that's wanting to unfold. Because right now, on a collective level, we're seeing how the divine feminine, the natural feminine principle, has been suppressed and oppressed. How distortions have played out because of this oppression. And I'm not just, when I say feminine principle or divine feminine principle, I'm not talking about an exclusion from men. This is something that men have within them as well. We all emanate from a woman. The distortion happens when we're not able to nurture an emotional dynamic within ourselves. And part of the resurgence of the divine feminine is about the ability for everyone to know how to emotionally nurture themselves, to emotionally validate themselves, the ability to access their emotional dynamics, the need for men to honor their own feminine principle that is natural to them as a way to nurture themselves. And where distortions have played out with men and women through suppressing this function, through how we've been conditioned. Lilith is about staying whole unto ourselves. It's about not submitting to the demands of conditioning that say that you have to make yourself smaller or you have to suppress something. Lilith is very much about the nurturing principle of the feminine. In our own natal charts, Lilith speaks to our most natural sense of self and where we are to nurture that as a way to remember our nature, like our soul nature of who we are, how individualistic and unique that it is, but how it all serves a purpose in this world. Lilith and Sag through transit right now, ruled by Jupiter in Taurus, is about staying whole unto ourselves through understanding what is authentic and natural for each one of us and nurturing that within, nurturing the expansion process of being self-reliant, self-sufficient, having self-esteem, sincerity, honesty, being honest with oneself, the ability to listen to our inner voice and our intuition about what it is that we're supposed to be doing, what feels natural to us. Lilith in Sagittarius is really about this right now. With Lilith in a crescent sextile to Mercury in Aquarius, this is where we can really have new ideas and inspiration, and I said ideas, but information, ideas, inspiration about what it is that we're needing to learn or discover about ourselves, and to have an integration of what this is. Aquarius is about our higher intelligence and our subconscious memories. It's about our individuated unconscious. And so right now we can be having bursts of insight about what it is that we're needing to do right now as a way to nurture our authenticity, our nature, our natural nature, about recovering this. Uranus rules this Mercury. And so again, I've said this so often, and I'm going to continue to say it. So much about Uranus and Taurus is about really paying attention to the ideas and the thoughts that repeat and start repeating more and more, that are not of a negative sense, but of a, this is the direction you should go. This is the choice that you should be making. You know, for some people, it's, I think I need to move. I think I need to move. Oh, I need to do this for my purposeful work. I need to get out of this relationship. I need to get out of this relationship. It can be anything. It can be an idea about whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing. But ultimately, this is about when we listen to our inner guidance that's emanating from within, it creates self-sufficiency, and it creates and cultivates more authenticity. And Sag is a fire sign, so it's about self-actualization through this creative function of rediscovering our nature, our inner nature, our inner reality, of understanding what feels natural for each one of us. The ruler of Uranus, the ruler of Mercury, Uranus, and Taurus, as this is happening, is in a disseminating trine to Venus in the sign of Capricorn. And so this is about really understanding what needs to be liberated in order to make space for what is natural, that is wanting to be revealed about each one of us, and to self-reflect and to take accountability and responsibility for this process as a way to emotionally mature and to cultivate more self-reliance. This is also where we can really come into an understanding about what needs to be liberated or jettisoned out of ourselves. This is also where we can become a role model to someone else through just projecting this inner work out there, through just being ourselves, through being authentic, through doing the self-work, the work that it takes to grow and to evolve. We can really be a natural role model for other people to know that this is obtainable. It can be done. And there's something really beautiful about being able to understand who you are and to be able to show up in the world that way and not repress that or overcompensate for that. On Friday, we have a new moon at 20 degrees and 40 minutes Aquarius. And whenever I pulled up this chart, I pulled up the Greenwich chart so that way I can really speak to the totality of what this transit and the conversations happening mean or reflecting. And this is so I can use the houses. So in this chart, and I posted it in the written forecast, if you want to look at it, I will post a link to this. But new moons are like, it's a birth. This is something that is wanting to be birthed. It's a brand new cycle of emotional dynamics, you know, that we're wanting to work with in order to continue to evolve, because we evolve through the emotional body. And this chart, this new moon, is in the 4th house. And so it's, when we're looking at all of the dynamics that I've been talking about that are leading up to this new moon, and how so many of us have been wanting to transform what it is and how we are in life, how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to another, everything I've been talking about. And this is speaking to, the nodal axis, the Venus-Mars transits, all of this. This new moon happening in the sign of Aquarius in the natural house of Cancer is really about this birthing process of needing to liberate from where we felt secure, where we felt insecure, what dynamics play into that, the known way of feeling or getting our inner security. If you're someone who gets their validation through people outside who are emotionally validating you, you always need to be told, good job, you're doing great. And that's where you're getting your self-worth and how you're getting your emotional validation. There can be a need to liberate from this dynamic because it's outsourcing this. So there's this need to really liberate from the known ways in which we have gotten our emotional needs met. And Uranus and Taurus is the ruler of this new moon, and it's in the 7th house in this chart. And so this really speaks to how, when we externalize our emotional needs, how we project our expectations or of what it is we're needing onto another, it creates an inability to be self-reliant, Taurus. And there is a need to liberate from this so that a transformation can occur. This moon is square, this Uranus, in a last quarter square. So this is like dynamic tension of there's an action that needs to be taken here. Uranus and Taurus in the 7th house really speaks to liberating from any type of imbalances. And when we're self-sufficient, we know how to emotionally validate ourselves. We know how to meet our needs on an emotional level. And so there's this need to objectify these dynamics as a way to detach just a little bit in order to observe what is going on or what needs to be liberated from. Again, there's this deep culmination process going on of why these dynamics and the distortions therein need to be liberated. This is seen with Venus, the ruler of Uranus, in the sign of Capricorn. It is the ruler of the South Node in Libra, which falls into this 7th house. The ruler of Venus is Saturn and Pisces. So there's all of these culminating, dissolving, wrapping up cycles in order for this transformative process to happen. And we don't really know in Aquarius and with Uranus what that is. This is like there can be a disconnect. But it can be where, just like that, we come into an awareness and the need to take the steps in order to liberate from where we've over-identified with something. Aquarius and Uranus have so much to do with conditioning, just like Capricorn does. But in a different sense, it's about liberating from the Capricornian structures of conditioning. And when we liberate, we don't really know what the new form is, how it's going to take shape, but it is this process of needing to create action through observing this. And this only comes out of self-reflecting, which is why Capricorn comes before Aquarius. I think I touched on where we can, in the sign of Aquarius, where we can come into this awareness of where we've over-identified. So seeing as Venus and Capricorn is being pulled into this conversation with the new moon, and it's ruled by Saturn and Pisces, it is really looking at our ideals and how maybe those ideals have impeded on how we not only inwardly relate, but how we make choices, how we make correct judgment. And it can be about our emotional reality. And so with this moon in the 4th house, pulling in all of this, there's this need to really observe how we have structured our emotional reality, where it comes from, the why of it all. And that can facilitate this process of individuation, which is also an Aquarius Uranus dynamic. And individuation really just, in a very simple way of putting this is about thinking for oneself. If we have Capricorn that comes before Aquarius, this is how we've learned. It's how we've been conditioned. And usually around our Saturn return, if we are aware at all, we will start to think about, is this really what I believe? Is this really what I think? Is this what, And so it's this rebelliousness that can happen, and it's rebelling against the status quo of what was learned. And this new moon really speaks to that and how this facilitates a culmination process. It's interesting because Saturn and Pisces is in the 5th house of this chart, and Pisces so much reflects timelessness, universal law, source itself, faith, inspiration, ideas. And the 5th house is really about self-actualization, and when we work with source, how we can co-create. So it's like there's this dynamic of liberation that helps us to co-create with something much bigger, or like our soul's intended desires and evolutionary course. And again, Uranus and Taurus, the ruler of this new moon, is like listening to yourself. Like, what direction are you being pulled to go? What idea about the direction? Where are you feeling this call? And this has the ability for us to consciously work with these dynamics. I want us to keep in mind that Lilith, in this chart is still in Sagittarius, ruled by that Jupiter in Taurus. And if that is about our nurture, like how we nurture ourselves and the feminine principle, how that is about understanding our most natural sense, our most naturalist sense of self, natural sense of self, excuse me, through expanding upon all of these dynamics pertaining to our relationship to self, Jupiter, Taurus being the ruler of that. I want to talk a little bit about Juno in this chart. I talked earlier about how there is this resurgence of, or there's a resurgence wanting to happen, a revolution, one might say, with Pluto in Aquarius, and this is a new moon in Aquarius, of the feminine principle, the natural feminine principle. Juno is about our devotion to ourselves and our devotion and partnership with others. And in the mythological story, in Greek times, Juno was known as Hera and was the wife of Jupiter. And I wrote about this in my forecast if you want to read more on this. But in this story, Hera, or Juno, marries Jupiter. And Jupiter cheats on her all the time. And no matter what, Hera stays with him. Sometimes they went back and forth with each other, but she was devoting herself at all cost, abandoning herself through staying with Jupiter. And at the end of it, Jupiter made sure that Hera was known as delusional and rageful and jealous and vindictive. And so it's really interesting to think about how, if you think about Greek times, this is patriarchal. It was men who wrote these stories. So let's keep that in mind here. But there is a natural view of Juno that I'm going to get into in just a second. But Juno corresponds with the signs of Scorpio. So like sexual union, consummation across the board has been viewed as how people consummated a marriage. So it's that Scorpio vibe, and it also pertains to Libra. And in the story, Hera abandons herself for the sake of the relationship and how that creates distortions. And it stems from how in society we are conditioned to devote ourselves to a relationship at all cost. And with Scorpio being a part of this dynamic, well, naturally being one of the rulers of, or asteroids aren't really ruled by a sign, but it corresponds with Scorpio and Libra, we can really see where natural resources, natural inner resources are meant to be shared in inclusivity in a way that is based on mutual reciprocity, and that's the Libra part, and where distortions and power dynamics, Scorpio, can play out through the imbalances that are created, Libra, through these distortions. So Juno in this chart is at 19 degrees Virgo in the 11th house, and it is retrograde. It is also in a first quarter trine to Uranus and Taurus, the ruler of this new moon. Lots of Aquarian energy that's also reflected by not just the new moon, not just Uranus, but Juno being in the 11th house. Juno in a distorted viewpoint, and through the distortions of the patriarchy, is where women are taught to be subservient to men, to stay with a man at all cost, where you can have these relationships that go back and forth, where domestic violence can happen, where a woman is taught to suppress what's natural about her in order to continue the relationship, to abandon herself and her own values for the sake of the relationship. It's where the distortion happens, where a woman takes on the values of a man or vice versa. We can see this is not just for women, for men on the flip side, it's the distortion of I'm going to externalize and get my emotional needs met through my partner because I don't know how to access them. I was conditioned not to do that. It's where women can be scapegoated oftentimes, especially if we're dealing with like religious kind of overtones. And Juno and Virgo can really speak to masochism or sadomasochism. And with Uranus in the 7th house of this chart, in a first quarter trine to Juno, it can really be about this need to liberate from these dynamics of where we self-abandon, whether we are male or female or how gender fluid, it doesn't matter. It's where we need to have the resurgence and a revolution of understanding the natural feminine principle within relationships, a natural way of devoting ourselves to this. It's about staying whole into ourselves. It's about being able to be independent in relationships and not lose sight of oneself or our values. It's about not denying Virgo, ourselves when we're in partnership. It's about really liberating from all of these dynamics. Juno is in this 11th house, and it's about understanding and self-actualizing. Leo's on the cusp of this 11th house through this liberation process and understanding what are natural values within relationships, so that way a new restructuring can happen, a revolution of how to be in balanced and harmonized relationships through liberating from conditioning that speaks to the ideals or the images around what it means to be in partnership with people. This new moon really speaks to taking an objective view at how our conditioning has conditioned everything, especially pertaining to our relationships. It's like another way that this can occur is being in a relationship and the imbalance that's created because maybe you're able to listen to where your partner is coming from and you can honor that and respect that. But on the flip side, your partner is not able to do it, and their way of thinking is always right to them. It can come up in so many ways. All you have to do is reflect on this. Juno is ruled by Mercury and Aquarius, which is also in this 4th house. So this is about this liberation from the knowledge that has been crystallized that deals with these conditioning factors. It's about liberating from the ways in which we emotionally validate ourselves in partnerships. Is it subservient? Is it masochistic? I think it's important for me as I'm saying this to talk a little bit about what like sadomasochism is and how it can show up in relationships. And especially in codependent relationships, we see this often. So masochism is about learned guilt. I feel guilty, and so I feel I need to atone. We see this a lot with people who get in a self-abandonment cycle, where self-abandonment, Libra, can perpetuate anger, Aries, because it's distorted. It's where we mask ourselves. Libra can be about masking. So in relationships, a self-abandonment cycle, which is just one Libra dynamic, can be where we are taking on the values or the needs of someone else and abandoning what we value and what we need. So this can look like my partner doesn't like me to hang out with certain people because he feels like they like me. And I don't really feel that way, but they do. And so then I don't hang out with those people. And then eventually I hang out with those people because I like this person doesn't like me. Like I feel like it should be okay. And then you feel guilt for doing that. And so you get angry and those emotions become displaced and we can project that anger onto someone else. Or we can feel guilty for saying, no, I'm not going to abide by that. And that's learned guilt, because for me as a woman, I'm supposed to be subservient to a man, and I'm supposed to like go with what they say. And so there can be a lot of anger that comes up right now where we see the distortions of this. So masochism can be where I'm feeling guilty for something that I shouldn't actually be feeling guilty for. And whenever I abandon myself, because I'm feeling guilt, eventually I blow up with anger, and then I feel more guilt about my anger. And then this cycle just continues to loop on and on and on. Sadism can really be about where one feels guilt that they need to, that is actually natural, but they act out in anger about that instead. And so they project that anger onto someone because they feel guilty about their actions. I know one of the ways that I've seen this happen with clients is one of their partners ends up having an affair, and the way that they understand that that's happening in their intuition is because all of a sudden their partner is being really mean to them, and it's because they feel guilty for what they're doing because it's against natural law. So there's all of these ways that this can happen. And so it's like taking a look during this new moon about all of these dynamics, how they've played out in your life. They might not have played out in the way that I'm talking about. These are just two examples. And there is a resolving. There's something we're supposed to be resolving about this dynamic through the objective awareness that this brings and the liberation that is supposed to happen. And through nurturing what is actually natural in relationships, as opposed to if you're subservient, or like how we're taught, that naturally creates an imbalance. Like, do we see how this is working out here in this chart? So this can be happening. Juno's also in a yod with the new moon and Uranus. So this emphasizes how we're meant to self-improve upon this dynamic through liberating from all of this, through liberating from where we might have denied our emotional reality pertaining to this, seeing as Mercury is in Aquarius in the 4th house of this chart. The liberation from these dynamics is also seen with Uranus in conjunct and a gibbous in conjunct to the South Node, both ruled by Venus. It's about taking responsibility, about being self-determined to self-improve through understanding and coming into awareness and consciously working with these dynamics during this new moon. So a lot of awareness, a lot of new ideas, a lot of new knowledge, new messages can happen during this new moon that help with a liberation process. This really is this time to, we're not just looking at one-on-one romantic partnerships either. This can be our friendships. Is one of you always playing the counselor and the other one the counselee? Is one of you depending on the other? Is one always trying to motivate the other because the other one can't motivate themselves? It can be really looking at all of these dynamics. Why do you do that? Do you feel value from that? Is that how you emotionally validate yourself? Are you getting your emotional validation from someone else, one of your friends doing this? This is a new moon that speaks to emotional self-reliance, emotional liberation. Maybe we've over-identified with some belief that has been projected upon us. It's all of this. There can be, with Uranus and Aquarius, there can be tons of ahas and dots connecting that can happen if we consciously want to utilize this. This new moon is powerful. And the last thing I want to mention to just further emphasize on how there is a need on a collective level to liberate from the patriarchy, Capricorn, is Venus during this new moon is conjunct Pluto's south node in Capricorn, both ruled by Saturn and Pisces. So this like really emphasizes the need to dissolve man-made structures that create crisis and trauma. Aquarius, crisis, Virgo, Pisces, and are destabilizing to us. I would really challenge, I think so often women are more introspective on an emotional level because we don't have the conditioning around us from every level saying that you have, like, if your emotions, you're too sensitive, you're a baby. Like, that's kind of like this conditioning that happens more often with men. It can happen with women. But for men, because I know I'm talking about the feminine, this really speaks to the undistorted masculine. Like, what would it look like for you to have not been conditioned or to receive the messages that your emotions don't matter, or you don't have the right to feel, or that you have to be the monetary provider while the woman takes care of the home? Like, it's like looking at what would it look like for gender roles to not be the norm, to not be a status quo. It's like, this is a new moon that I want everyone to feel like that they can work with. Every man or person assigned male at birth has a right, a natural right to nurture their emotional reality. This helps with emotional maturation. It helps with living authentically and naturally. Like, what would it look like if you hadn't been conditioned in the ways that men in society are conditioned? How would that feel in your life, taking out what you've been conditioned to think how it feels? It's part of Mercury and Aquarius and the fourth house. It's really using this in a way that is inclusive to all genders, whether gender fluid, whether assigned male at birth or assigned female at birth, whether you're trans, anything, non-binary. It's looking at, have you been conditioned more to be suppressed? Did you grow up in an oppressive childhood? It's really objectifying all of this and thinking about what it would look like to nurture oneself and to understand that there's like an inner communion with self. So much is wanting to change right now, collectively and personally, individually, for each one of us regarding this. Women who have been conditioned to be submissive, well, you've been conditioned to not actualize the undistorted masculine principle within yourself on the flip side. So it's like you can't be independent, you can't do this, you can't do that. We all hear these things. So it's like, let's really objectify what this means and how this has shaped our reality, and really consciously work towards having an integration and a co-creation of the masculine and the feminine right now. I hope you all, I feel like has been a long video, but there was so much to talk about. But I hope that you all have a beautiful new moon. I feel like this can spark new ideas, new revelations. It has the propensity to change our inner magnetism. This is a great new moon to work on manifesting. That's a very Aquarius, Uranus, 11th house type of thing. And journaling about this. Mercury journaling about what you value, what you need, how you want to be self-sufficient, how you want to emotionally nurture yourself. This is a beautiful time for a self-revolution, like a transformation to take shape and to take place. And it's like all we have to do is objectively look at what constitutes our reality. And that's different for each one of us. So have a beautiful week, and I will see you all next week.